I'm a general practitioner at a small medical clinic here in the UK. In March of 2019, I had a young woman show up to an appointment for a routine checkup, nothing outside of the ordinary. It went fine. She was pretty much in perfect health, and I told her as such before wishing her well in that sort of, "We're done here, now please leave" kind of way. Only instead of leaving, she starts to make casual conversation, asking me about my interests, if I enjoy being a doctor, stuff like that. She's flirting really, really hard, like aggressively so. Despite the fact that this made me a little bit uncomfortable, I had a wife and a newborn baby at home. I obliged her at first, just making general chit-chat with her until it was fast becoming time for my next appointment. So obviously, in the nicest way possible, I tell her I'm a busy man and that I needed her to leave so I could see my next appointment. She seems a bit disappointed, but she seems to understand, grabs her things and leaves. I suppose she was just lonely or something, so I didn't really think anything of it. And to be honest, I completely forgotten about the girl a couple of days later. About a week goes by, I get into work nice and early, and I'm sipping on my coffee while I'm going through my appointments for the day. When I see a name that's vaguely familiar to me, but that's not unusual at all. I have loads of regular patients that I see sometimes twice or thrice monthly. But I know these people in first name terms. Well, this name I couldn't quite remember where I'd seen it before. When it comes time to see this particular patient, I'm actually kind of looking forward to it. Simply so I could find out who this person was and put the whole question of why does this name seem familiar to rest. Then when the patient walks in, it's the Flirty Girl. And that's where I'd seen the name before. She'd already told one of our receptionists that she's been experiencing stomach pains, sometimes so severe that she wasn't able to sleep. But when she walks into my office, she's looking good, acting perfectly normal. She doesn't seem tired or in pain, and in fact, she's obviously spent a lot of time doing her hair and makeup, not to mention being overly flirtatious as usual. I ask her about her symptoms, and she insists that she's been having the most horrific stomach pains, reiterating that it's been making sleep almost impossible. So I give her a quick look over, and there doesn't seem to be anything wrong with her. But medical issues involving the digestive tract can be very difficult to get to the bottom of. I ask her about her diet, whether or not she's eating anything overly spicy or acidic, which she replies that she eats very healthily, sticking the salads and the like. Now I'm starting to suspect that she's just making these appointments to be able to get to talk to me, which I know sounds a little bit arrogant, but I just really got this feeling in the pit of my stomach. So towards the end of the appointment, I just come out and ask her if there's any chance that she's just making up symptoms as a way of being able to see me. Obviously, she's all like, "What? Me? Never." And let's just say she wouldn't be winning awards for her acting anytime soon. So I just take her word for it, pretending that, of course, she'd never lie about something like that. And of course, she's genuinely experiencing horrible stomach pains. I tell her to keep an eye on her diet, make sure she's not eating anything that might irritate her bowels, and make it clear that she should make another appointment if it carries on, as I might have to refer her to a specialist. Cut to about a fortnight later. I'm in my office just typing up a few prescriptions when I get a call from the receptionist telling me there's something going on in the reception area of the clinic. I ask exactly what's going on, but she sounds really shaken up and just says that I need to come down to reception immediately, as there's a patient of mine there who's demanding to see me. Puzzled as to what it could possibly be, I walk down to reception, only to see the Flirty Girl leaning on the front desk, and she looks terrible. Actually terrible. She's not bothered to do her hair or makeup this time. She looks really, really pale, and she's obviously in a lot of pain. Right as she sees me, she turns, looks me in the face, and says, "I told you I had stomach pains," and proceeds to vomit blood all over the floor of the reception area before collapsing under the floor. Obviously, we call her an ambulance, and she gets rushed to accident and emergency for treatment, and the entire afternoon I just feel absolutely terrible, like I'd ignored this girl and assumed something deeply self-centered and arrogant, having totally neglected my duty of care. I try to get through the rest of the day. I tried my very best to stay focused on the rest of my appointments, but it was tough. I couldn't get the image out of my mind, that horrific mental image of the poor girl looking like death, looking so confused and let down before the bloody contents of her stomach slipped from between her lips and onto the surgery floor. At the end of my shift, I called up the hospital the poor girl had been taken to and waited patiently until I could get a hold of the accidents and emergency T number who had dealt with her. Funnily enough, it turned out to be a doctor that I knew from many years before, one who I actually knew from university. So after a little catch-up chat, I asked her about a patient who had been admitted that afternoon having vomited blood in a surgery just outside the city center. She knew exactly who I was talking about, and at that I sort of broke down and told her about how foolish I'd been, how I'm pretty sure I'd verged on being negligent to my diagnosis of her. But she stops me in the middle of my little emotional breakdown and tells me that the girl refused to talk to them, that she insisted on going back to see me, and that the only thing she could think of was that apparently she had attempted to end her own life. Those words sent me into a spiral of confusion. I asked her what she could possibly mean by that, and that's when she told me that they had to pump the bleach out of her stomach by inserting a feeding tube to fill her stomach with a fluid that basically flushed the bleach out of her system. Basically, the girl had drank bleach in some misguided attempt to see me again, and it almost ended her own life. I'd never had a stalker before, but I suppose that's exactly what she was. A completely mentally unhinged young woman who would go to any lengths to see me again and prove that her lies were actually the truth. It was horrifying thinking there are people that obsessive that they'll do something like that, but I suppose that's just the world we live in. I used to work as an events manager for a very successful nightclub here in New York City. It was honestly a dream job, a professional party planner, something thousands of young people dream of being able to do for a living. My phone is filled with selfies I've taken with literally hundreds of VIPs. Big name house DJs, rappers, sports stars, you name it. I pretty much spent my weekends meeting famous people and partying, all getting paid pretty handsomely for it. But then quarantine happened. At first we were put on furlough, which was a pretty sweet deal. Sure, it sucked having to stay indoors pretty much all day, but I was still getting paid 75% of my salary just to settle my butt and watch Netflix or do yoga. But then rumors started to go around that the club wouldn't be reopening, which I honestly thought was crazy at first, since the place was making bank before the lockdown, and the owner was definitely wealthy enough to keep it going no matter how much various business expenses were costing him. But then, one day we all got an email confirming our worst fears. The club was shutting down indefinitely, and as much as it pained him to do it, we'd all been laid off. I was absolutely devastated. I just broke down crying right there at my laptop, and they were those real, ugly tears. I had no idea how I was going to pay rent for the foreseeable future. I don't know about you guys, but a $500 stimulus check was barely going to cover a month's rent, and I haven't even really got much in the way of family to lean on. The only jobs I knew of were temp jobs and nursing homes, and I knew I couldn't do anything like that. I was complaining to friends online, generally feeling sorry for myself and begging for a few dollars when one made a weird suggestion. She told me about a website called OnlyFans. I'd actually never heard of it at the time, but when I Googled it, I actually got kind of annoyed that she'd even suggested it. I'm not some e-girl, and I can count the number of guys I've slept with on one hand, and they've all been long-term boyfriends. Okay, so for people that don't know, OnlyFans is basically just a place where people can put up photos, videos, audio files, all kinds of things, and put them behind a paywall. Sounds innocent enough, right? And it can be, but OnlyFans is more famous for other stuff. Adult stuff, which is where the real money is. I told my friend that I'd have to be desperate to resort to posting stuff like that online, but she came back with the fact that they don't have to be outright nudes, they can be just lewds, which apparently is an actual term that's thrown around in those sort of circles. She went on to tell me that there's a huge market for so-called real girls, like girl next door types, which is most definitely the kind of look I have. All I had to do was put up a few freebies, just kind of like showing myself off, and put some raunchier shots or videos behind a paywall and see what kind of response they got. I didn't even have to show my face. I think that's what sold it, covering up my tattoos, and no one would ever even know it was me, right? Besides, it was triet or risk getting evicted. So I picked out a few bralettes and booty shorts that I thought were cute, took a few pictures, and then uploaded them to an OnlyFans account that I'd started. Then I posted some of the tamer shots to a subreddit called Argon Mild, which would basically serve as advertisements. I got instant attention. Hundreds of upvotes trickled into the thousands, and a steady flow of messages from thirsty guys all received the same copied and paste responses in return. Hi, Thanks for your lovely compliments. If you'd like to see more of me, a lot more, sign up for my OnlyFans account, along with the link to my page. A handful of guys who told me to die, basically saying how they were only interested in free content. How any girl that actually charged for that kind of stuff or whatever was well, you get the idea, but just enough were interested in me to actually sign up to my OnlyFans and pay the $30 monthly fee I demanded in order to see more of me. Every time I posted an Argon mild, I got more followers, and it got to the point where, not only was I able to pay my rent on time, I ended up making considerably more money than I had in my old job thanks to OnlyFans' tipping system. Basically, fans can make requests, and you can fulfill them for a little extra cash. For example, one dude offered me $1,000 to show my face, just my face. Nothing lewd, nothing like that. As he put it, it'd be worth the cash just to see me smile. By the end of the first month of posting, I was making serious bank. My friend was right. Was low risk, high reward. Or at least, that's what I thought. So about 5 weeks after I started my OnlyFans, I walked down to a local grocery store to pick up some food. Like most places, there was a queue winding out the front entrance, since the store was only allowing a certain number of people inside at any one time. So I'm just standing there, alternating between checking my phone and just sort of people watching when I notice a guy across the street stop walking and begin to stare at me. He had a long beige coat on, slick back hair, glasses, and like a lot of other people walking around, he had one of those disposable medical masks on. He was incredibly creepy, but this is New York. It's full of creeps. And he wasn't the first older dude to try to start an impromptu staring competition with me, nor do I think he'll be the last. So I just sort of ignored him and carry on checking my phone. I didn't figure he'd be creepy enough to start anything in broad daylight. And besides, if he had a mask on, there was little chance of him coming within 6 feet of me, I assumed. Only when I get my grocery shopping done and head out back into the street for the walk back to my apartment, he was still there. Still staring at me from across the street. Again, super creepy, but nothing I was about to freak out about. So I just started walking back towards my apartment, but he just follows me, stays on the opposite sidewalk, sure, but follows me nonetheless. The last thing I wanted was to lead this creep right back to where I was living at, so I take a couple of wrong turns, walk him around in a circle, and eventually lose him entirely. I mean, it was irritating that I had to even do something like that, but that's just something us girls just have to do from time to time, I suppose. Let me just take the time to say that obviously not every guy is a creep like that, and it never seems to be the guys I want to follow me home that ever do so, but it's enough guys to make it a problem for us. So I finally get within a block of my apartment building like an hour after I thought I'd be home. It's incredibly hot outside. I feel sweaty and gross, and I'm just looking forward to jumping in the shower to get cooled off. What do I see waiting outside my freaking apartment building? Yep, the creepy guy in the long beige coat. Not even the summer heat could have stopped the chill from running up my spine. Like, how in God's name did he know where I lived? Out of all of the apartment buildings in Williamsburg, he just happened to guess which one was mine. Something was going on. Something real bad. And I had a feeling I was about to find out just what that was. I decided to just bite the bullet and walk past the guy. If he tried anything, I could always just threaten to cough on him or whatever. Failing that, need the balls, then call the cops. Only as I'm getting closer to him and he finally locks eyes with me, he addresses me in a way that makes me just freeze in my tracks. He uses my OnlyFans username to get my attention. I pretend not to know what he's talking about, but he's all like, "I know it's you. You can't lie to me." And for the first time, I felt this deep sense of shame at what I'd done, which is weird because I don't really have any regrets. But in that moment, I felt like I'd been caught doing something I shouldn't. He told me it was nice to finally meet me, that he'd paid me a lot of money, and that he didn't think he'd gotten all that he was owed. I broke and just straight up asked him how he knew where to find me. I know the admission wasn't the wisest move, but like he said, there was no point in lying by that point. Besides, I just needed to know so I could maybe avoid this happening again in the future if I even kept my OnlyFans up at all. He just laughed at my question in the most horrible, patronizing way, like it was the stupidest thing he'd ever heard. Then when he told me, I felt like face-palming so hard. I've been dumb enough to take some pictures that showed the street outside my apartment. Nothing with too much detail, but enough for some entitled psycho like him to put a little work in to figure out where I lived. I couldn't believe how short-sighted I'd been, how my own greed had gotten me into a potentially dangerous situation. The guy then asked if he could have my phone number so we could stay in touch properly. I told him he couldn't, and that my boyfriend wouldn't be too happy if I did. The whole boyfriend thing was a lie, but I figured it might deter him from getting too weird. But that's when he started getting really, really mean. Apparently outraged that I could be using something like OnlyFans to get money when I should be making all that kind of thing exclusive to my boyfriend. I got sick of trying to be reasonable with the guy. Heaven figured that being nice was the surest way to keep myself safe. He didn't try to block my way as I went into my building, nor did he try to follow me up the stairs. But he did spout a tirade of passive-aggressive abuse at me about how I should be loyal to those that loved me and all this other stuff. I've deleted the OnlyFans account now. I just about have enough money to last me until I get a new event planning job or just any other job at all. But this guy knows where I live now, and I know next to nothing about him. I don't know if he has a violent history. I don't know if he's hurt women before. And I don't know what he's planned for me now that I have tried to let him know that I'm not available. I'm so worried about what my future holds. Or if other creepy, obsessive people have been able to work out where I'm living based on those pictures I took with a view out of my window. I know it was dumb of me to start that account in the first place, but lockdown has put us all in a bunch of very difficult situations, and I think I'd rather be dealing with this stalker problem than a homeless problem, as crazy as that might sound. But if anyone has any experience with anything like this, or any advice, don't hesitate to write about what you know in the comments. I'd be really grateful to anyone that can help me keep this guy at arm's length. You see, although I live in Hong Kong, both my parents were born here and I speak fluent Canton. I spent the first 7 years of my life in North Carolina, so if I'm honest, sometimes I feel way more American than anything else, and I speak fluent English too. I feel like I identify much more with American culture a lot of the time, and I'm a huge nerd for things like Dungeons and Dragons and other fantasy role-playing games. So as a result of the lockdown that's been imposed here over the past few months, I found an outlet for my geekiness. Then that's Discord D&D groups. They're just awesome. If you can get yourself a good dungeon master who's actually creative, they can be a lot of fun. It's literally exactly the same as being sat around a table playing, only it's even easier to share pictures of characters and scenery and whatnot. So recently I was playing as part of a group when my character gets like romantically paired with another character for the sake of the story. I get pretty invested in my characters, so I play the part as convincingly as I can, so everyone can get as emotionally involved in the story as possible. And it actually ends up being a pretty amazing campaign that ends up in a few characters dying, which we were all devastated about. No, usually everyone is pretty clear that it's purely a role-playing thing and that it's basically just acting out a character for the sake of the campaign. But the guy I'd been paired up with ends up contacting me outside the D&D game. He said it was the best he'd ever felt playing out of campaign and wanted to know if he could keep in touch with me so he could invite me to future games and stuff. Of course, I told him sure that it was one of the best campaigns I'd ever played and that I'd love to get involved with future games, especially if he was involved. He played his character super convincingly, and he was a great writer, able to describe thoughts and feelings in a way that others just couldn't seem to. Then, a couple of days later, he starts asking me a lot of out-of-character questions, inquiring about my real life and such. I figured he was just being friendly, and people have been getting pretty lonely during all the lockdowns that had been going on. So I suppose I'd indulge him, letting him get to know me maybe a little more than I should have. Then he came out and asked me if I would ever consider doing like a long-distance relationship. I told him those were never a good idea, no matter how much you like someone, as they tend to put people into really unfair positions where they can't pursue local relationships with people they might even be better suited to. It was then that he started getting kind of reticent, like his replies got all short and monosyllabic. I asked him if he was feeling okay, and if I'd said anything that he found upsetting or something. And he straight up went and told me that he really liked me, and would I consider having like a Discord date with him via video chat. I told him I didn't think it would be a good idea, that what happened in the D&D game was just like acting, and that it wasn't real. Then he got mean. Really, really mean. He told me I was a liar for making a guy feel like I had. than just pulling the rug out from under him, so to speak. He told me I deserve every bad thing that happens to me, and he'd personally see to it that I suffered the punishment for the pain that I caused him. For a guy in his 30s, he was the most emotionally immature person I'd ever met in my life, and I'm used to hanging with freaking teenagers. I just blocked him and thought that that would be the end of it. But more recently, I've had all kinds of Discord friend requests off of people that have turned out to be the same guy, trying to add me over and over again. Sometimes he pretend to be someone else, only to give himself away with some little detail. It made me incredibly paranoid to the point that I've had to stop playing D&D online altogether because he continually infiltrated as many groups as possible, simply to try and find me. Some of his messages were just apologetic at first, but as I ignored them, they got crueler and more violent with each instance. The one that scared me the most was just a list of all the things he knew about me. My name, the university I study here in Hong Kong, even the names of my parents and brother. I don't even know how he'd gone about getting his hands on that kind of info. All stuff he managed to find out on his own through some stalkery detective work. This creep had obviously put a lot of time and efforts into finding out additional stuff about me, and it's his level of determination and zeal that seriously freaks me out sometimes. Like, how far is he really willing to take this? I know he's far away. I know he's in the United States. And that means there's enough distance to make me feel a lot safer than I would otherwise. But I'm terrified he'll just show up in Hong Kong and track me down. Like, there aren't many girls here that have the American accent I do when I speak English. Like, he's much older than me. He has a job, has money saved up and stuff. Like, there's literally nothing that could stop him from doing something like that if he really wanted to. And I think someday he might actually want to. But it's some of his threats that have really made me feel nervous, like how he's told me that if I don't give him a chance, he's going to email some of my university professors to tell them how I've been cheating on assignments, plagiarizing the works of others. Accusations like that are taken very seriously by the university. I had no idea a friendly little D&D game could end with me being in this almost constant state of anxiety like every day. Guys online can be really creepy and misinterpret just basic friendliness as being flirting or whatever. I'm not saying it's everyone, but it's enough to turn some girls' lives upside down. Like, I trusted this guy. He seemed really nice, and now he literally has the power to ruin my life they choose us to. Like me personally, I'll be taking much more precautions when it comes to what information I reveal online in the future. Last summer I met a guy called Michael through the online dating app Tinder. He was lovely at first, very charming and funny, and we ended up going on a few dates to some local cafes and bars that actually went really well. But at one point he started getting really possessive over me, acting like I was his girlfriend and getting really jealous and stuff. At one point I got a text message from him asking me who the bunch of guys were that I was friends with on Facebook. I told him the truth. They were just old school friends or people I knew through work. But this didn't satisfy him at all, and he demanded that I unfriend them. Obviously, I told him that I wasn't going to do that, and it was really unfair of him to be asking me to do something like that, especially considering we haven't even been dating all that long. That's when he started getting really abusive and paranoid. He was convinced that I was dating other people on the side and that I was just using him for free drinks and food. That was a ridiculous accusation on its own, as I'd always made a point of splitting the bills with him. I work, I'm independent, and I don't need a man to pay for things for me. Eventually, I got really sick of the way he was acting, and I told him I didn't want to see him anymore. But he kept trying to contact me. At first, he told me he was sorry and that the past relationships had ended badly with infidelity and the like, which was why he acted so paranoid over things like that. But I made my mind up. I couldn't go out with someone like that, and a friend of mine had made a good point that if he acted like that once, he was bound to do it again at some point. I asked him to leave me alone, but he wouldn't. So I ended up blocking his number on WhatsApp as well as blocking him from actually calling me entirely. But his attempts to contact me didn't stop there. He used every means that he could. Eventually, he got a hold of my work email and started sending me messages there too. I couldn't change my work email, but I could block the sender yet. That didn't stop him. He made a brand new email address for every email he sent me. I had to block him on Facebook too. I had to block him on Instagram. Every single social media platform I had was bombarded with messages, and some of them were really frightening. At one point, he even managed to get a hold of my PayPal username and sent me payment requests for money that he said I owed him for drinks and food we had on our dates. He threatened to end his own life if I didn't get in touch, and sometimes he threatened to hurt me too. Some of the messages were really graphic too, where he described ways with which that he'd take his own life or take my own. He was obviously putting a lot of real thought into it, and that's what gave me sleepless nights. But I think the worst thing was that he kept getting in touch with friends and colleagues of mine, even family members, trying to tell them what a terrible person I was, and how he was going to hurt me if they didn't get me to respond to his messages. In total, I received over 4,000 emails, over 300 phone calls, and hundreds of messages from him. I have had to change my whole life to ensure that my children and I were kept safe throughout the ordeal. I still have to maintain this, and my life will never be the same again. But I kept a lot of the messages handy so that when I finally broke in contact with the police, I had a shed load of evidence on hand to show them, and this was all they needed to arrest him. Michael was sentenced to 12 weeks in jail, suspended for a year after pleading guilty to stalking in Liverpool Crown Court. He was also handed a 5-year restraining order which stopped him from contacting me. I finally feel like I've had some justice regarding the whole thing. He might not be going to prison for the things he's done, but he's certainly in a position now where if he does try to carry on stalking me, he will be put away, which frankly is where people like that belong. If there are any women reading this who are going through a similar situation, please be brave and keep hold of some of the messages for evidence. It's the only way to prove that it's happening, and it's the only way the police will actually do anything about it. I used to love posting on Instagram. It was a place I could show off my new clothes hauls, and the compliments from friends and internet strangers alike really boosted my confidence. You see, I was something of an ugly duckling when I was a teenager. I was bony, I had braces, and I was totally lacking in self-confidence. And as shallow as it sounds, it was social media apps like Instagram that really helped me get a real sense of self-worth and made me feel pretty. But towards the end of last summer, a guy happened to slide into my DMs, paying me lots of compliments and saying all kinds of nice things about the things I was wearing. I have to admit, I really enjoyed the attention, but he wasn't really my type, so as silly as it seems, I just kept the conversation going for a few days, chatting back and forth and stuff. Eventually, he asked where I lived. I told him I was in Cambridge, and he told me he was from Ilford in East London. Then he asked if I fancied going out sometime. I told him it was a bit far to go for a date. It's like an hour's drive between here and Ilford. And aside from that, I thought he might be a bit too old for me. He was 28, and I was 19 at the time. That didn't put him off at all. He kept insisting that we should give the whole dating thing a go. I just didn't have the heart to tell him no outright. So again, as silly as it was, I just kept stringing him along by telling him maybe or we'll see and stuff. One Saturday morning, the guy asked me what I was up to over the weekend, and I told him I was out shopping with a few friends. I'd be picking up some new outfits, and I'd be posting them to Instagram so he and everyone else could see what I'd bought. He said he was looking forward to seeing them, and that seemed like the end of it. Then a few hours later, I was going from shop to shop on Cambridge High Street, not a care in the world, when I happened to see a familiar face across the street. It was him, the guy from Instagram. I was stunned. He'd driven all the way up from London after asking me what I was doing, just so he could know where to find me. I remember getting really nervous, so much so that my friends started asking me what was the matter. I kept quiet about it for a little bit until one demanded to know why I was acting so strange, so I told her. I told her everything, and as I actually said the words, I think he's stalking me. I broke down crying in the middle of a busy shop. She was so supportive about it, though. She waited with me in the shop and ordered an Uber on her phone, telling me everything was going to be okay and that there were things we could do to stop this from happening and how the guy wouldn't be able to get away with it. About an hour later, I was home and safe, but I was so upset that I had to tell my parents what had happened. My dad was furious. He couldn't understand why I'd been posting pictures of myself online for anyone to see, and I suppose I don't blame him. Back when he was a kid, there was nothing remotely like Instagram where you could just go online and look at pictures of total strangers. He wanted to take my phone off of me, but I told him that there were things I could do to make myself safer, like blocking the guy and making my account private. At least he said it was far too late for that. But the guy knew where I lived, and I suppose he was right. A few days later, I walked out of my house heading over to my friends who happened to only live around the corner. Ours is a very small, close-knit community, so I happened to notice a car that wasn't normally parked in our quiet little neighborhood. But when I looked and saw who was in the driver's seat, I froze. It was him. Again, the guy from Instagram. I was so scared. I had no idea how he'd been able to find out exactly where I lived, and the only thing I could think of was that he had been following me around town for days. Maybe he'd even followed that Uber that I'd taken back to my house. But it was what he said to me that I found so disturbing, the way he phrased it. "You need to come with me." I ran back into my house shouting for my dad, who came hurtling out of his little office asking me what the matter was. When I told him he was outside, he knew exactly what I was talking about, and his cheeks flushed red with rage as he grabbed my hockey stick from out of the cupboard and walked down the front path towards the street. I didn't follow him, but I heard the shouting. He kept telling my dad the same thing he told me, that I needed to go with him, but with no other explanation as to why. My dad told him to get lost, and that if he came back, that he'd beat the life out of him. But he did. He kept coming back over and over again. The police said they couldn't do anything about it initially, that we needed to make a log of the times he was visiting and to take pictures if he could. So that's exactly what we did. Every time he showed up, my dad would go out with the hockey stick and his phone, take a few photos before scaring him off. He was amazing like that, but I won't lie. It put a real strain on our family, and I could tell my dad was getting really tired of having that same drama unfold week after week. Once we had enough evidence that the stalker kept returning, my dad didn't go outside when he showed up. He just called the police and explained that he had about 6 different pictures detailing different times this guy had showed up outside our home. Only then did they actually bother to send anyone. It was a huge kickoff when they did. At first, they just politely asked the guy to move along, but he refused, and for some reason kept telling them the same old thing, that I needed to go with him. That's when the police tried to arrest him, and he resisted, telling them they had no right to. It was only in February of this year that we actually got any resolution on the whole thing. On the 21st of February, the guy was sentenced to 21 months in prison at Petersboro Crown Court. He had pleaded guilty to harassment and resisting arrest. The thing is, though, I don't know if that's actually solved the problem entirely. I know he won't be turning up outside for just less than 2 years. But what about after that? What if he decides he's not finished with me and he continues to turn about outside my house? I thought the prison sentence would be the end of it, but only 21 months. What if he's angry about it, gets out and decides to hurt me? I just can't stop worrying about it. I can't get it out of my head. The whole thing has completely ruined my life. So I ended up matching with this girl on Tinder a few summers back. She was this punk girl, all kinds of piercings with short crop bubblegum pink hair. She was cute, really cute, and she actually seemed really into me. The weather was horrible in the afternoon that we matched. Typical British summer here, and I was in no mood to go trapezing around in the rain, but it didn't seem to bother her at all, and she wanted to make plans for that evening despite it being such short notice. Now, I'm a planner. I like having notice about doing stuff, and I really don't like being spontaneous at all. I don't know why, it just makes me nervous. So when she insisted we meet that evening, I wasn't keen on the idea at all. But she just sort of charmed me into it, so we met for drinks with her, giving me lines like, "Take a chance and live a little," stuff like that. Now that I look back, it was a total imposition, and that should have given me a clue right there, but let's just say I was thinking with my other head. So the first date goes pretty well. We did seem to actually have a lot of chemistry, but it was weird in that after like a few drinks, she's all like, "What are you up to after this?" I tell her I'll probably just go back to mine, and she responds with, "Can I come, yeah?" Now I know that seems way too fast, but like I said, I wasn't entirely thinking straight, so I let her come back to mine, make her some pasta, then we fall into bed together for, you know what? The next day we hang out a little, grab some food, just chill stuff, but I'm completely expecting her to leave to go back to her place at some point. Only the later into the evening it gets, the more I realize she has absolutely no intention of doing so. So I start dropping hints to her, mentioning how tired she must be, how I probably don't have enough food on hand to make a meal for two, blah, blah, blah. It's not like I didn't enjoy her company, I just wanted my own space, you know what I mean? We seemed to go from 0 to 100 over the course of 24 hours, and as cute and charming as she was, I was just not ready for that. In the end, I had to just spell it out for her. I felt rude, but I just laid it out that I had work to do in the morning, and I had to be responsible and get a decent night's rest, because we both knew that wouldn't be the case if she was sleeping in my bed again. I tried to, blend the harsh truth with a little compliment or something, but it didn't go down well, not at all. She got really, really upset, getting moodier and moodier as I tried to continually soften the blow, explaining it wasn't her that I really liked her, stuff like that. Then, as she gathered up her things, she started to cry. I was upset too, devastated even, and thought she might be girlfriend material, but she really, really wasn't. I'm not one for drama like that. I don't think many people are, so the idea she could become so bloody unhitched so quickly, it really knocked the wind out of me. She left in the same flood of tears, and no sooner had she gone, I was typing up an apology text to try to make her feel better. I felt awful, I really did, but I knew the really hard part would come over the next few days when I'd have to explain to her that I couldn't see us working as a couple. But before I could, I got a text off of her asking if she could come round to mine again. She hadn't even gone 24 hours, and she was asking to come back, like the little drama from the night before had never even happened. That was deeply disconcerting, and I felt constricted, strangled, so I had to just do the right thing and tell her the truth. So I typed out this long, equally apologetic message, telling her what I was thinking, how I couldn't see us together, and I just wasn't ready for a relationship. Whatever came to mind that might soften the blow, and then hit send with a silent prayer. I didn't get anything back. We were using WhatsApp by that point, and I knew she'd actually read the message from the 2 little blue ticks that denoted it had been seen, but she didn't reply, and that's when it all really started. That evening, she was shouting in the street up at my flat window, telling everyone what a terrible person I was, how I'd gotten her pissed as a fart on that first night, and then taken her back to my flat and assaulted her. I couldn't believe this was the same girl, seeing the rage that poured out of her. The way she screeched and barked up at my flat window, never did I imagine she was capable of anything like that. But there she was, telling everyone who walked past her open their window what an evil, manipulative person I was, destructive and deserving to be in jail. It was without a doubt the worst experience of my life. I remember just sitting there on the couch, fingers plugged in my ears, imagining how my life was about to fall apart around me. My friends would turn on me, my family would shun me, and eventually the police would turn up to arrest me and charge me with something I'd never even think about doing. You'd think it would be my turn to cry then, but I was just numb. Completely and utterly numb before the complete and all-consuming fear hit me. I know I should have just phoned the police and cut off the accusations, but I was convinced they'd side with her, that basically there was nothing I could say that would convince them that I was in fact the victim in the situation. She came back twice over the next week, no matter how much I begged her over WhatsApp to just leave me alone. The one night I thought she might turn up, and she didn't. I thought of my dead ended, but as I left my flat and walked down to grab a few tins of Stella from the corner shop, I saw that she'd daubed something on the doors of my apartment building. It said my name is a predator, and he lives here in flat 4, it said, in bright yellow paint on the dark red door. I had to go from apartment to apartment, 6 others excluding my own, and explain what was going on to the people that lived there. 2 slammed the door in my face, and neither were girls either. The only 2 girls that lived in my building actually listened, with one sympathizing with me. The other told me that if it was true, she hoped they'd threw away the key. But that didn't bother me because I knew it wasn't. Weirdly enough, the girl didn't actually go to the police. In retrospect, this is because she'd had been charged with making a false complaint and wasting police time, which in some severe cases can actually end in a jail sentence. But for about a month, she made my life complete torture by getting in touch with pretty much everyone she could and telling them all about how I was a predator. I was constantly fighting fires, be it with friends, family, work, colleagues, neighbors, you name it, and I had to tell them the same old story. A story that took on this stale, terrible air of repetition to it that got more intense every time I told it. Then one day, finally, it just sort of seemed to peter out. There were no more messages from people close to me like, "What's this I heard about you? Please tell me this isn't true." No more from unknown numbers that said, "You're going to get what's coming to you," or "We're going to get you when you least expect it." It all just sort of ended. But the nightmares didn't end, nor did this sense that every little look from a stranger was about to turn into them punching me in the face or worse. My life had been well and truly turned upside down, not destroyed completely, but it was enough. I just want to end this by making it clear that that is an abhorrent crime. But so are false accusations, harassment, and inciting violence against an innocent person. And please, if this happens to any of you, go to the police immediately. I'm a PT at a fairly popular chain of gyms here in Australia. I had a girl who used to turn up to all the spin classes I ran, I mean every single one, until she ended up giving herself an injury. And even then, she continued to turn up and openly take painkillers, nor to get through the sessions. Eventually, I had to take her aside and advise her that she should seriously consider taking some time off to let herself recover, and she burst into tears saying that she couldn't bear not to see me. I tried to be kind and told her that I loved her enthusiasm and stuff and that it had sucked not to see her too, but she needed to do what was right for her body. Then she asked me if I wanted to see her outside of work, but I had to decline her. I had a steady girlfriend at the time, and I knew she'd not be happy about me seeing this girl even as friends. Besides, it would be really unprofessional to pursue any kind of relationship with someone who was literally paying for my company. Then over the next few weeks, I began to see notes attached to my windshield of my car whenever I finished work. They were from the same girl, and every time they had a phone number attached, but I had to ignore them. I couldn't give her any idea that I was interested in her. Then the notes began to get nasty, really nasty. I won't repeat what they said, as they had some frankly disgusting language to them. Then one day there was a fire engine in the parking lot of our gym, spraying water all over a car that was on fire. My car. CCTV showed the exact same girl from the spin class walking up to my car and dousing it in gasoline before setting it on fire. She was arrested, and I chose to press charges. But she managed to dodge a prison sentence because apparently she had a history of mental illness. I also came to find out that I wasn't the first person she'd become obsessed with. I basically live in fear for my life now. I filed a successful restraining order against her, but honestly, I don't think she'll abide by it. I think she's just waiting for the right time to approach me again, and when she does, I'm really, really scared about what she'll do.